It's not very nice. I'm sorry.
I know, but I mean, part of the issue is just like being able to come home and see my wife too, so it's like, okay.
They understand Kingston.
You know, but I'm gonna try really hard. Hopefully the weather will cooperate in May. So we'll see what happens. Okay, let's turn it on. So is everybody here that's going to be here?
Yep.
Okay. I did not have a chance to look at the agenda other than I know that we're going to be doing
I
planning.
did print it for you. Let me go grab it.
Okay.
Yeah, tonight's a pretty simple night, just basically approval of the minutes and then go over some basic planning training and then
Okay.
kind of prep for some upcoming things that I will ask you guys to review and scrutinize to the ends of the earth, so.
Is there going to be a review of the riverfront development tonight?
Not tonight, I don't have any key points for that tonight.
Have we heard anything about if they're going to stay or move?
I haven't heard anything on that right now.
Because it was supposed to be at the end of February, right? The last time we met.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we
So-
live now? We're not, are we?
Yeah, we're on there now.
Okay.
I can get you updates on that though.
Okay. And then afterwards, I'll probably need to talk to you about the landscaping behind our house.
Sure.
Thank you, Chris. Okay, since I think all of us who are here are going to be here, I guess I'll go ahead and get started with the meeting and call it to order. The first item that we have are the meeting minutes in our agenda to review and approve. Did anybody have any comments on those meeting minutes?
No.
Chris? Okay. All in favor of approving the meeting minutes as documented, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries, that is approved. Next item on the agenda is zoning map review. And I'm going to open it up, Casey, if you could explain that to us.
I'll move up here just so I don't have to keep turning to look at you guys and see, look easier to ask questions.
No problem.
Okay, so SOAR zoning map was redone several years ago. In the process, some properties were allowed to kind of pick what their new zoning was going to be based on the change. Some of them elected not to change, and it just kind of fell into what the city rezoned them as. As a result, we have some spot zones throughout our town, throughout our map. I'll point out some out here in just a minute. The problem is we have some discontinuity in some areas, and we have some individuals that are reaching out to the planning department saying, hey, I would really like to be able to do something with my property, but I can't because it's improperly zoned right now. Everything around me is right, but where my property is right now isn't. So right now we're working through trying to identify all those pieces and parts so we can kind of get this done in maybe one shot instead of having to bring every meeting continual, well, we're going to redo this one. So we're just going to try to get it done a little bit more holistically and maybe have a much more complete map maybe by the end of this year. That's kind of the goal.
Okay.
So on the map, and I'll come over here and show you just some of the general areas that we're looking at. A lot of what we're looking at is some commercial spaces and some residential spaces. So, and most of this stuff we brought forth by the actual residents. Instead of the city initiating a rezone, we'll try to get it all collectively done that way.
Okay. Is there any, unfortunately with me driving in, was there any kind of exhibits that were emailed to us?
I handed out, basically I don't have any particulars of the actual zones right now because no one submitted anything, and before I go too deep into those processes, it's just been phone calls right now.
Okay.
So I didn't pull any of those up. I'll just kind of give you just an overview, and then we'll just kind of cover what the zones that are mainly in question are. You should have a packet in front of you just to kind of go over what we're going to just generally look at.
Okay.
Do you anticipate anyone saying, no, I don't want my stuff rezoned?
Yes, I do. And partially because Either their zoning right now is, I guess, more amenable to future build-outs. You know, there's some places that might be zoned commercial, but their neighbors, you know, are commercial, but they want it to be residential. And so you have barriers and things like that, and that could potentially cause an issue. So it's some of these things that slip through. And I'll show you here really quick, just kind of an example of what I'm talking about. It'll be a little easier to wrap our heads around it. So over here, this is, if we're looking at the map, right over here is Wyoming Recycling. This is where the Beacon Club and everything is. So if we go back up into these neighborhoods here, you'll see this is commercial right here. And then it's going to transition right over here into this some mobile home park. And then it's going to transition into this light industrial. So we have some, you know, some incongruencies here. We have this whole thing of commercial, and this is largely trailer homes. And then we have this mobile home stuff here, which is appropriate because that's what these are. But some of these individuals in here in this commercial area that have their trailers would like to basically be in the mobile home park because it makes it easier for bank loans and all these things, because right now they're zoned commercial. It's not really fitting as far as when they go to get lending. So that's something that we have run up against 3 or 4 times now. In that same area, we have, you know, other spots that are just kind of incongruent despite having the same housing type. So that's just one area that we'll look at. We've been contacted by a gentleman that's up in this, where are we at here? So this is West Yellowstone Highway. This is where Wyoming Machinery is. And so if we come down into here where the school is here, the Mountain View School. So up here we have kind of a mixture. So this area here is light industrial, but there's a lot of trailers and things in here. There's actually some stick-built homes in this as well. And then there's a stick-built home here, and then there's some shops in here. There's a push for maybe some of this to become residential. The issue on that is that it will bring in, you know, new zoning requirements. Once you rezone something from commercial to residential, all of a sudden you can't do a lot of the stuff that you used to do on your property. And so those are just some of the initial considerations that have come up. But as we look at the rest of the map, and I know we talked briefly kind of during a last impromptu session, we did have a landowner here off of Wyoming Boulevard and West Yellowstone considering rezoning from a C1 to a C3. They haven't submitted anything yet. That is potentially coming, and so that's going to be one of those where we have to, as a staff and then as planning and zoning, have to really look at the land uses and see what's appropriate, what's not appropriate.
And do we know exactly what that owner is trying to do? And the reason why he wants to change it to a C3?
Yes, so the big reason behind it is, so general commercial has some restrictions as to what types of business can go in there. One business that had been looking at the area was a small chemical pump manufacturer. Not storage of any chemicals, they just manufactured the actual small pumps, and the pumps were about the size of a bread box.
Okay.
So there was no real storage of anything hazardous or anything like that, but because the zoning didn't allow for light manufacture, they didn't feel that they could move there.
So where exactly is this on Yellowstone? Is it like near where the roller skate ring is? Or?
This would have been by the trailer park, the Lariat trailer park where the old Peterbilt was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so, that opportunity is no longer, but those are the type of things that they might consider in the future, is just be able to sell this building that's been vacant for a bit.
So it's the Peterbilt building that's been vacated that they want to move into. Okay.
Yeah, and nothing's come before us yet. This has just been some things that have kind of come to the office just as general considerations and things that we've requested that if this wants to be done, it needs to come in front of P&Z and run the process.
Right.
So.
It seems reasonable initially.
Right, and all these things, do initially until we kind of see what we're looking at and really kind of see how these things fit. So if I can turn your attention here to this packet really fast, we'll go through a few things on it.
I'm sorry, one more quick question,
Yeah.
Casey. So the There was you pointed to a neighborhood or an area that's southwest of the Mountain View, the old Mountain View Elementary School.
Yes.
I do know that there's a lot of residential there, and then there's a couple of commercial, one in which is the milk house.
Yes.
So is it impacting, that's the same area we're talking about, right?
In the general
On
sense,
6.
yes. Yeah, one of them is that's kind of up on the periphery of it, though. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if the folks say no, the property owner says no, they don't want to change,
Yeah.
what recourse do they have? None?
Essentially, yeah.
Okay.
You know, it's one of those things that we're going to try to make it go through, make things as, you know, amenable as possible to all the parties and maybe come to some agreement, because there's a lot of different zones we have and things that we can do to make things more holistic. Some zones are just improper, and then that's a different channel that I haven't explored in depth. So,
Yeah, because especially if you're talking about some that are either commercial or residential, we probably should try to do as much as we could to accommodate those owners as much as
Yes.
possible.
yeah, and that's the intent for the planning department, is just to make things, you know, more health, safety, welfare focused for the citizens, and then more things kind of, you know, easy to read for our map and just more simple for the general public when they're trying to navigate zoning.
Okay.
Where if you purchase a home that's under a mobile home and your neighbors in commercial, you have totally different zoning regulations, and so the way that the, you know, the building department, the way that the code enforcement department, you know, kind of treats you as a property owner are completely different under the regulations.
Right, because there's some things that are grandfathered in that are
Yes.
outdated, so obviously that would take into consideration as well.
Yes.
Okay.
So this is just kind of a general overview of residential one and commercial one, because these are the topics that we're probably going to see coming before us most in the near future. So the purpose of zoning generally is to protect health, safety, and welfare, to guide orderly development, ensure compatible land uses, and implement a comprehensive plan. So anytime we're doing these rezones, we're looking at maybe updating our map, that's our guiding principle on it. So if we're outside of those things, you know, planning's gonna try to catch it before we get outside of those things, and then P&Z's that next layer saying, hey, pump the brakes, this is where, you know, maybe we aren't looking at orderly development in this. So, and you guys understand, this is just kind of a general overview. So how the zoning works, so the city is divided into zoning districts. We have many of them, and sometimes it looks like a patchwork. Sometimes it's very consistent. So each district allows certain uses. Development standards regulate the buildings inside those and the business types. So regulations include setbacks, lot sizes, and again, business types that can go into, you know, commercial, residential, or mobile home, what have you. So residential one, which is what we passed during the Ridge West rezone and replat. So residential one is intended for single-family neighborhoods. It's supposed to protect residential character and limit density and incompatible uses. Lot size is 6,000 square foot minimum, and lot widths have to be a minimum of 40 square feet. Or sorry, just feet in general. So typical uses are, again, single-family dwellings, home child care, group care facilities, just more or less like we had over on Badger Lane, where we had the home with the, I'm trying to remember what that, unaccompanied youth initiative we had over there. As an example, accessory uses or dwellings, so those are going to be like garages and things like that attached to a home. Parks or playgrounds, religious institutions. There is a provision for neighborhood commercial, and so that is a small neighborhood serving business that does not disrupt neighborhood character. So that's narrowly defined, and that's really important for all of us to understand, anyone that's even applying for one of these things to understand, is because this is low impact, and it has to be that way. So we can't have a 24-hour convenience store in there. You can't really add more traffic. It's basically supporting that neighborhood.
It's sort of almost like an 8 to 5 with, you know, maximum of 3 or 4 cars parked in front of it or something like that.
Yes, that's exactly what it contemplates. So yeah, I mean, examples are exactly, you know, you could have maybe a small medical office like you're seeing being built off Poplar. There's a little dentist office up there, so it's not going to impact anything weekends or nights. It's not going to really cause undue burden to anybody. Branches for banks, small service establishments, and small restaurants and convenience stores with very limited hours. Those are the type of things that we hope to see come to some of these neighborhoods or around here, but those are the kind of constraints on it. And so I wanted to bring that up because it's not really a area that's really highlighted in our regulations right now, although it doesn't allow it. It's just something kind of important as we continue to grow. We may see those, especially out toward the Ridge West area.
Sure, if I could.
Sure.
So just as a point of clarification on the slide here, I believe our R1, when we did our rewrite, goes down to 5,000 square feet, doesn't it?
Actually, it was 6,000
Okay.
is where it ended out at.
'Cause don't we have some lots in Ridge West that are like 5,800 square feet?
They were all upsized to become in compliance. They actually ended up losing, well, they didn't lose any lots, they actually had to rework some lot sizing to make everything accommodate the 6,000 square feet.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it was 5,000, and then during the, I want to say it was ordinance 823 adoption, it went up to 6,000. Yeah. So any questions on residential one in general? It's pretty straightforward. It's it's where single families live.
I guess the only thing that I have a comment on is when you're talking about neighborhood commercial, you really have to look carefully about some of the lighting and landscape uses, even if it's like low impact. We probably just have to look at that a little bit closer.
Yes, and that's going to be a function of staff and the P&Z to really make sure that our site plans and things like that are really in order, so we don't really impact the residential neighborhood or the character of those places.
Anybody else have any questions?
So commercial one, commercial one is an area that we'll focus a little bit on, especially as we get more businesses coming into mills along the corridors. These are going to be things that are maybe a little bit more impactful than just the residential zoning. So general commercial regulates just commercial activities, retail services, and offices, supports business districts, lot size minimum of 6,000 square feet, lot width minimum of 50 feet. So these are the uses. It's retail, sales and service, restaurants and taverns, commercial storage, mixed office, multifamily residential is allowed there, medical clinics can be in these zones, and packaged liquor and theater. These are just general examples taken directly from our regulations. But that's the style that can go in here. Kennels can also go into this, which is something that is impactful, has been impactful to our public in the past, just the positioning of kennels. So, unlike neighborhood zones for commercial, this is for larger buildings, higher traffic uses, and regional serving businesses. This isn't anything that would be, we would say is tucked into a neighborhood and contemplate serving, all of Casper or Natrona County, and being tucked into a neighborhood. That would be unfitting for this. Most C1 projects require site plan review, so that allows the city and planning and zoning to look at parking layout, building placement, landscaping, drainage access, lighting, all the really important things that are really impactful to the city and abutting zones.
You said most. Which ones would not go through a site plan application?
You may have existing businesses that are already in, just have a change of ownership. You wouldn't really have a site plan change there.
So there wouldn't be any physical changes to the site, whether it be lighting or
Right, yeah,
or a small addition or anything like that?
Correct, yeah, if there's no material change, you won't see that come before you, but if there's anything that would be more of a substantial change, that'll definitely come with the site plan to zoning. So yeah, it's any real changes that are going to impact, any part of the public health, safety, or welfare are going to come in front of planning and zoning.
Okay.
So, commercial development. So there's parking standards, and these are one thing that always come up, and we always have to deal a lot with this. So parking has basically square footage and spaces versus spaces requirement. And it varies based on the size of your business and the size of your lots. So, and there's a whole table in there that describes, for every 300 square feet, you have to have one space, or for every 100 square feet, you need one space of parking. So it just depends on the type of business and the volume that you're intending to service out of there. But those are things that the city's, you know, very concerned about, especially because it's off-street parking, and we don't want to add to congestion. So the minimums that we require is when the building is constructed or the building is expanded, or there's, you know, a use that's going to require more parking. I can send you these two in a full version to see if they're a little easier to read. We require asphalt, concrete, or some kind of a crushed rotomill in limited circumstances. Those aren't permanent type of surfacing that we really like. I think you'll recall that we had the Vision Beyond Borders ask for an extension on theirs because they ran out of time with pavement. So they were issued a temporary permit to basically occupy with the understanding that that needs to be paved, and it will be paved. But, you know, rotomill isn't something that we would traditionally say, yes, go ahead and put that down for a permanent parking structure. So it's authorized in very limited uses. Landscaping is one of those areas that is sensitive to everybody. So parcel size dictates landscaping in the commercial sense. So anything from 0 to 19,999 square feet is a 10% minimum for landscaping.
Do we give them any direction on what we expect as far as landscaping?
There is some direction as far as, you know, within parking lots, it says how many spaces, then you may have to have an island with some kind of greenery or something like that in there, but otherwise it's kind of limited based on what their site plan looks like and how it kind of ties into drainage. And because most times when we see site plans come through, they'll tie their landscaping in with drainage structures just to try to, you know, maximize the economy of any kind of building.
Are those required to have irrigation?
So there's green space requirements in some of these.
So is there any kind of shrub to tree ratio or anything like that in regards to landscape requirements?
There is basically it's a greenery requirement. I can pull that for you.
Okay,
with me
I need to
tonight.
go back and look at it, but I know some of the ones that were passed before I got on board, they didn't do anything.
Yeah, and there have been some, I'll tell you, like we had the Big D that just got built in there. You know, there's a landscape requirement there, but some of that was waived just due to the nature of where it's at. So right along, you know, the Belt Loop and, you know, West Yellowstone, not having a lot of grass there and.
Well, yeah, we were just,
Yep.
you know, my mindset was that there's gonna be a lot of heat
Yes.
because of the asphalt and the concrete, and it's gonna be very hard to have any trees there or
Yep.
shrubs.
And then that's exactly the the type of thing that we would hope that we would see planning and zoning look at and say, yeah, this is appropriate, but, you know, certain places they absolutely need, you know, some landscaping because it's
Right.
to just address the areas of, and one, just promote a better looking city. 20,000 square feet to an acre, it's 8%, and over 1 acre, it's 6%, so we go down as we go up, so it's kind of counterintuitive. So that may be something that, you know, we want to look at down the road.
Well, especially if you're, I mean, my hope is someday in my lifetime, I think what would really help the city of Mills is if they had a major grocery store move into this area. I mean, I see opportunities around the new residential development. And when you start getting into bigger lots like that, then you're definitely going to want to look at the landscape a little bit more closely,
Yeah,
especially if it's adjacent to residential.
yes, agreed. So, kind of the crux of tonight, what is a rezone? So a rezone is a change to our official zoning map. It has to go through an ordinance change, which is the 3 readings. So it alters permitted uses, so it's it can be a major change to what you can do with your land or what an individual can do with their land. So it's not, you know, it's like I've told people, it's not for the faint of heart to a rezone. It can be kind of cumbersome. And it follows a very public process. So the process that it follows is an application is submitted. Staff does a review, public notice goes out. Planning and zoning have their hearing, and then there's a public hearing with city council where a decision is rendered over the course of 3 readings. So like with Ridge West, we had a publication, the first hearing, the second hearing, and then the third, where, you know, on the third and final, they passed the rezone on that. So there's multiple steps, multiple, you know, times where it can be heard and objections can be made. We do accept written objections, and all those are reported to the city council. And in the meantime, if if we have objections before then, we forward them to planning and zoning. So our public hearing requirements is notice to nearby property owners, public hearing date before a decision is made, an opportunity for public comment. So we have 140 feet circumference basically around the property, saying, you know, anyone that's within this area gets direct notification, and then we do a published notification also, saying that on this date at this time, this is your opportunity to come speak for or against this. So that's the general process we use. We did reduce in the ordinance 823 the notification distance. It's gone from 300 feet to 1,000 feet down to 140. So it's bounced a lot over time.
Yeah, I think I had proposed that, thinking it should be more like 300, but the city council ruled 140, I guess.
Yep.
We talked about that.
Yeah, I remember.
So decision criteria, this has to do with consistency with city policy as far as, again, health, safety, welfare, growth of the city, accommodation with the rest of the city map, public health and safety, and a lot of that has to do with the things that are brought forward to planning and zoning staff or the council. We'll have, you know, neighborhood input is really where health and safety comes in. If it's not forwarded by police, fire, any other utility provider that we reach out to. Typically, we reach out to police, fire, public works, Rocky Mountain Power, Source Gas, you name it. If they're involved in there, we want to know if easements or anything is going to change, or if land use is going to affect their ability to operate their utilities in there. Site suitability, that's another really key factor. What does it look like around there? Is it going to be consistent with the rest of the area, or is it going to unduly impact neighborhoods? And then compatibility with surrounding uses, very similar to suitability, but you know, if we were to say allow a rezone in an area that's heavily industrial to residential, and then several years down the road we find out that that residential neighborhood is just experiencing a hard time selling, individuals in there having quality of life issues, then we probably didn't do the right thing early on in the process. The duties of the commission in a rezone will be to review the applications as they see them. Once they've been through staff, they go to P&Z for review for their version of completeness. If P&Z doesn't feel it's complete, then they can be tabled but not heard. That's something within the power of the P&Z. We conduct the public hearing, which you do when we hear anything. The public has the opportunity to come. These meetings are noticed. Evaluate any evidence that's brought forward by staff or the public or even the applicant, and then recommend approval or denial. That goes directly to the council during their readings. Yes?
Now, does this run through the legal department at all? When this stuff is being
Sure.
reviewed?
So what happens is when it's initially received by the city, it's looked through for completeness and to see if we have any kind of obvious issues within our compliance with our regulations or our rezoning requirements. If there is a question, or if there is anything that looks out of the ordinary, it does go to city legal to look over. A lot of the things that went through with Ridge West, that was reviewed by our legal department before it ever got to P&Z.
So would you anticipate folks that don't want to participate in a change that they would lawyer up?
Oh, they could. It would be within their ability. I mean, typically the remedies situation is you exhaust your administrative remedies, which is here. You come and you protest and you say, I don't want a rezone to happen. And then if you have general standing in it, I can't give legal advice or really speak to how the legal system works, but generally if you have some kind of a standing, you actually could object through legal means.
But I would imagine, legal standing would involve the property owner itself trying to be rezoned. They would have legal standing.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
So the issue would be, I think, how would we accommodate them? Because the last thing we want is to create a lawsuit that costs city money.
Correct. And a lot of when we move forward with this process, it's going to be basically soliciting those people that want to rezone, want to have this more consistent. And a lot of it will make, in my view, will make things a lot simpler for them moving into the future anyway. So, but if they don't want to be part of that, then we can carve them out. We'll just have, we may have some spot zones that exist, but if we can kind of clean it up in general and help the rest of the neighborhood, that's probably the way we'll have to
I
go.
think the only thing that could be a concern is, again, we have to be careful as you have commercial and
Mhm.
industry adjacent to residential properties and the implications of that, of change of ownerships in the future.
Yes. Absolutely. So the best practices that we'll kind of follow on with that is, focus on our regulations and any kind of policies that are, that are in. So when the rezone comes before us, let's, scrutinize it with what the existing zone is and versus what it will be. And then, bring questions and please bring questions, grow me on those when we're in here, just to make sure that we are, both in line when we forward a decision to the council, or, either way. Consider long-term impacts. That's one of the ones that requires a little bit more forecasting, and that's why the P&Z is really valuable, because we have so much different insight. I think, what is this particular property gonna look like in 5, 10, 20 years? And what are our decisions tonight? What are they going to do? So that's gonna be really important as we especially move on with some of these potential things that are gonna come toward us. Maintain a fair public process, and then ask any thoughtful questions of myself or any of the applicants when they come. Feel free to ask lots of questions.
So we've got areas of the city that probably need to be upgraded, a nice way of saying it. All right. Code enforcement, do we go and talk to some of these property owners and say, hey, this is not acceptable, that what we have?
So I can't speak to what code enforcement does. That's a function through the police department. But I know that code enforcement does make contact with unkept properties and other forms of non-compliance. I can't say to what extent, because I don't have any oversight of that.
Some of them are on main streets. I mean, they're not inside residential areas. They're on the main streets that definitely give mills a negative appearance.
Sure. So any general questions or anything else we would like to cover on as far as rezones or residential or commercial?
Sure. So like when we did our rezone here along or adjacent to the Riverfront District, I mean, that's kind of similar to what we're talking about tonight. The folks that we rezoned here that were residential that, are now commercial, essentially they were all grandfathered in. Essentially, you can continue to use it as residential until there is a change in use or sell the property, et cetera. I presume that would be the same logic will apply to these spot rezones. Will they retain the old rules until they pull a new permit or make an upgrade or change
That's
something?
correct.
Okay.
So that's correct. Yeah, there would be no, no forced change to the exit, to whatever is, overlaid or changed. The conditions would stay as they are until it gets sold or a change is sought, then it would have to come into, functional compliance at best.
So if I suddenly I want to build a detached garage, well, now you're doing something on the property, you're now going to fall under whatever new zone we've put you in.
Yes.
Yeah.
And some things get complicated in different parts of mills. We have single owners of multiple lots, and if one lot happens to be zoned, differently than two other lots, and they want to replat, that creates a lot of other issues which we have to work through before it gets to this point. And some of that requires a rezone of this lot here and then combination. So there's lots of steps that sometimes come through. Okay. Any other discussion or questions?
Is there anything we need to be thinking of before we start getting into this? I mean, do we have areas that we should be saying, like, are we trying to, I guess really the purpose is to kind of clean this up as step one and then go forward, or are we trying to determine, okay, well, do we want to rezone some of this because we want a dedicated commercial area in X, Y, Z, and we want to make sure that residential is going over here in A, B, C, or is this really just kind of a cleanup, first of all?
Sure. First of all, this is really just aimed toward cleaning up and adding consistency to our zoning map. And so the commission's help in kind of identifying areas that maybe we should look at, very, very helpful. So, any guidance and direction, please feel free to inundate me with it. I'm happy to look through it and work through that.
I don't think there's any other questions.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess the next agenda is public comment, but seeing that there's nobody in the audience, I guess we can move on. And our next meeting will be April the 2nd at 5:30 p.m. Any other questions before we adjourn? Okay? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.